Elena Vasquez walked through the long corridors of Nexus Prime Station, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The walls stretched high above her head, built for beings much larger than humans. Everything here was designed to make visitors feel small. The builders had succeeded. She carried a simple briefcase in her right hand and wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. No fancy decorations or medals adorned her chest. She looked like what she was, a middle-aged woman from a young species that had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. The other beings she passed in the corridors towered over her. Some floated instead of walking. Others moved on too many legs or too few. A few glowed with their own inner light. All of them stared at her as she passed. Some pointed, a couple laughed. Elena kept her eyes forward and continued walking. The main chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before her like a cathedral. 12 massive seats arranged in a circle dominated the space. Each seat was built for a different type of being. The crystalline Zeparians needed special supports for their geometric bodies. The gas-dwelling Thani required containment fields. The ancient ethereal consciousness appeared as shifting lights that hurt to look at directly. Elena walked to the center of the circle where a small human-sized chair waited. It looked like a child's furniture next to the alien thrones around it. The representative of the species known as humanity will take her place, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elena sat down and placed her briefcase on the floor beside her chair. She pulled out a tablet and a pen, old-fashioned paper and ink, not fancy alien technology. High Magistrate Kethvar of the Arcturan Federation leaned forward in his seat. He stood nearly 3 men tall with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed blue. His voice carried the weight of authority built over thousands of years. Ambassador Vasquez, your species has been summoned before this council to answer for serious violations of galactic law. Do you understand why you are here? Elena looked up from her tablet. I understand that charges have been brought against humanity. I am here to listen to those charges and respond as appropriate. Several council members exchanged glances. The vegan collective representative made a sound that might have been laughter. It sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Very well, Kethvar continued. The charges are as follows. First, unauthorized expansion into the Veil Nebula region. Second, violation of the non-inference protocols regarding contact with primitive species. Third, excessive technological development that threatens galactic stability. Elena wrote quickly on her tablet as he spoke. She asked no questions. She made no protests. She simply took notes. These are serious charges, added Councillor Thagzani of the Sirius Collective. Her tentacles writhed as she spoke, a sign of either excitement or anger among her people. Your species acts as if galactic law does not apply to them. Young species often make this mistake, said the representative of the Riel Commonwealth in a voice like grinding stone. They think their short existence gives them the right to ignore the wisdom of ages. More sounds of agreement rippled around the circle. Elena continued writing. The ethereal consciousness spoke next, its words forming directly in everyone's minds rather than being heard. We have observed humanity for 2 of your centuries. You show the same patterns as other failed species: aggression, rapid expansion, disregard for established order. Perhaps, suggested the Cannabis Federation delegate, with what sounded like amusement. They need guidance, a firm hand to show them proper behavior. Elena looked up briefly, then returned to her notes. Kethvar gestured with one metallic hand. A holographic display appeared in the center of the circle. It showed a map of local space with human colonies marked in red. Behold the evidence of human expansion, he announced. In just 2 centuries, they have spread to 47 star systems. They terraform worlds without permission. They build military installations in neutral space. They make contact with species that should be left alone to develop naturally. The display changed to show images of human ships, human cities, human faces. To Elena, they looked like home in progress and hope. To the council, they apparently looked like a threat. Most concerning, added Councillor Vexhai of the Proyon Alliance, is their rate of technological advancement. They develop new technologies without proper oversight, without asking permission. They might accidentally create something dangerous or intentionally, muttered another council member. Elena finished writing and looked up. May I ask for clarification on a few points? Keith waved permission. When you mention unauthorized expansion, which specific treaties or laws are you citing? The expansion protocols are well established, Cathar replied with obvious irritation. All expansion must be approved by the Council. I understand that is the current practice. I am asking about the specific legal foundation for that practice. Which document establishes the Council's authority over unclaimed space? Several Council members shifted in their seats. Cathar's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Such questions show the exact attitude that brought you here, he said. Young species questioning the authority of their betters. Elena made another note. I see. And regarding the non-inference protocols, could you provide me with copies of the complete text? I want to make sure I understand the exact definitions of interference and primitive species. The protocols are clear, snapped. No contact with species below Class 7 civilization status. Everyone knows this, of course. I would still appreciate written copies for my records. Finally, regarding excessive technological development, is there a specific law that limits the rate at which species may advance? The chamber fell quiet for a moment. When Cathar spoke again, his voice carried a warning. Ambassador Vasquez, you seem more interested in legal technicalities than in addressing your species' violations. This attitude itself demonstrates why humanity requires guidance. Elena nodded and made another note. I understand your position. When will you be presenting the specific charges and evidence? We have just presented them, said the ethereal consciousness, its mental voice sharp with annoyance. I mean the detailed charges with supporting documentation, legal citations, specific incidents with dates and locations, evidence of actual violations rather than general descriptions. The council members looked at each other again. This time there was less amusement in their expressions. Cathar straightened in his massive chair. Humanity's violations are obvious to anyone with eyes to see. We do not need to justify our authority to judge them. Elena wrote that down too, word for word. Very well, she said calmly. Please continue. For the next hour, the council members took turns describing humanity's various crimes against galactic order. They spoke of human arrogance, human violence, human disrespect for tradition. They compared humans to other young species that had been brought to heel over the millennia. Through it all, Elena sat quietly and took careful notes. She asked for clarification of dates and locations. She requested copies of relevant legal documents. She wanted everything in writing. The council members grew increasingly irritated with her questions, but she never raised her voice or showed emotion. She simply listened, recorded, and asked for more details. As the session continued, Elena began to understand something important. The council was not really interested in law or justice. They were interested in maintaining their position of power over younger species. She filled page after page with notes. Soon she would need to respond to their charges, but first, she wanted to hear everything they had to say. The council had been ruling the galaxy for thousands of years. They were used to young species begging for mercy or raging against their authority. They were not used to someone taking notes. The accusations grew heavier as the hours passed. Elena's hand cramped from writing, but she never stopped taking notes. Each council member seemed eager to add their own complaints about humanity. Councillor Zeeth Mara of the Vegan Collective rose from her crystalline support structure. Light refracted through her geometric body as she moved, casting rainbow patterns on the chamber walls. The humans engage in reckless terraforming, she announced, her voice like singing crystal. They change entire worlds without understanding the consequences. On Kepler 442b, they introduced Earth plants that now grow beyond control. On Wolf 359c, they built cities that disrupt natural weather patterns. Elena looked up from her writing. Could you define reckless in this context? And are there established guidelines for terraforming that humanity should have followed? Guidelines. Star's light flickered with what might have been amusement. Young species should not terraform at all. Such work should be left to those with proper experience. I see. And who determines which species have proper experience? This council, naturally. Elena wrote that down. The delegate from the Centauri Federation floated forward in his containment field. Inside the shimmering barrier, gases swirled in patterns that hurt Elena's eyes to follow. More concerning than terraforming, the being said in a voice like wind through metal, is their militarization of space. Humans build weapons platforms. They arm their merchant ships. They establish defensive positions around every colony. Elena's pen moved across the paper. Are there treaties that forbid defensive installations? The need for such treaties should be obvious, rumbled Councillor Crescent of the Real Commonwealth. His rocky feature showed no expression, but his voice carried disapproval. Species that require weapons clearly cannot be trusted. Have humans ever attacked another species unprovoked? The chamber fell silent for a moment. Crixton's stone-like face remained impassive. They have the capability, he said finally. Intent and capability often become the same thing with young species. Elena noted that as well. High Magistrate Keithar gestured again, and the holographic display changed. It now showed images of various alien worlds. Some looked healthy and thriving, others appeared damaged or dying. But the most serious charge Keithar announced concerns the non-inference protocols. Humans have made contact with 17 primitive species. 17. They share technology, provide aid, and worst of all, they involve themselves in local conflicts. The images on the display showed human ships landing on alien worlds, human doctors treating strange patients, human engineers building bridges and power plants. Look at this, Keithar continued, pointing at one image. Humans on Gliese 667c teaching the native population to use electricity. The species was not scheduled to discover electrical power for another 300 years. Elena studied the image. It showed a human woman in coveralls, working alongside tall, thin aliens with 4 arms. They were building what looked like a solar panel array. What was the situation on Gliese 667c when humans arrived? Elena asked. Irrelevant, snapped Vixani, her tentacles writhing faster now. The protocols are clear. No interference means no interference. I understand the general principle. I am asking about the specific circumstances. The ethereal consciousness pulsed brighter as it spoke directly into everyone's minds. The planet was experiencing natural climate fluctuations. The native species would have adapted eventually or died out. Both outcomes are natural. Elena's pen stopped moving. She looked up at the shifting lights that represented one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The species was dying. Population reduction is a normal part of evolutionary development, the consciousness replied. Interference prevents natural selection from operating properly. Elena returned to her notes with renewed focus. Councillor Yexai of the Proyon Alliance leaned forward eagerly. His insectoid features clicked and buzzed as he spoke. Humans also interfere in conflicts between species. On HD 4307G, they supported the losing side in a territorial war. They provided medical aid to refugees. They even gave weapons to the weaker faction. What was the nature of this conflict? Elena asked. One species was naturally dominant over the other. The stronger species was simply claiming territory that was rightfully theirs through conquest. Elena wrote faster. The accusations continued for another hour. Each council member seemed to have a favorite example of human interference or wrongdoing. The pattern became clear to Elena as she listened and wrote. The Tati incident, where humans had helped a species rebuild after their sun began to dim prematurely. The council called it interference. The species called it survival. The Ross 128 situation, where humans had mediated a dispute between 2 nations that were destroying their shared world with chemical weapons. The council called it meddling. The planet called it peace. The Proxima b crisis, where humans had evacuated an entire species before their world was consumed by solar flares. The council called it disruption of natural processes. The rescued species called it miracle. And finally, Keithar said, his metallic voice carrying finality. We come to the most damning evidence of all, human technological development. The display changed again, showing images of human laboratories, factories, and research stations. In 2 centuries, humans have developed faster than light travel, anti-gravity systems, fusion power, genetic modification, artificial intelligence, and matter conversion technology. This rate of advancement is unprecedented and dangerous. Elena looked up from her notes. Dangerous to whom? To galactic stability, Keithar replied. When young species develop technology too quickly, they inevitably use it for destruction. They create weapons that threaten everyone. Has humanity threatened anyone with their technology? They have the capability. Elena had heard that answer before. She wrote it down again. Counselor Vexhai buzzed excitedly. They develop technology without permission, without oversight. They might accidentally create something that destroys star systems. Or intentionally, added Thexani. Have humans caused any accidental destruction? Not yet, admitted Sthara, but the risk remains. Elena filled another page with notes. As the session continued, she began to understand something else about the Council. They were not just interested in maintaining power. They were afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of progress. Afraid of species that might challenge their authority. The final accusation came from the ethereal consciousness itself. Its mental voice carried the weight of millennia as it spoke. Humanity represents everything wrong with young species. They expand without permission. They interfere without consideration. They develop without restraint. They question authority without wisdom. They must be controlled before they destabilize the entire galactic order. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the chamber. Several council members nodded or made sounds of approval. Elena finished writing and looked up. Are there any other charges you wish to present? Cathar consulted a display only he could see. Those are the primary violations. Do you have any response to these serious accusations? Ilelanina closed her tablet and placed her pen beside it. I would like to hear the proposed sanctions first, if you please. The High Magistrate smiled. It was not a pleasant expression on his metallic features. Very well. The Council has prepared appropriate punitive measures for humanity's violations. Elena picked up her pen again and opened a fresh page. She had a feeling she would need it. High Magistrate Cathar stood from his massive throne, his metallic form gleaming under the chamber's lights. The other council members leaned forward in anticipation. Elena could feel their satisfaction radiating across the circle. The Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding appropriate sanctions for humanity's violations. Cathar announced, these measures are designed to bring your species into compliance with galactic law and proper behavior. Elena's pen hovered over her tablet, ready to record whatever came next. First, Cathar continued, immediate withdrawal from all contested systems. Human presence in the Veil Nebula must cease within 60 standard days. All colonies, research stations, and infrastructure will be abandoned. Elena wrote quickly as the High Magistrate continued. Second, dismantling of all military installations beyond Earth's home system. No weapons platforms, no armed vessels, no defensive structures of any kind. Humanity will rely on Council protection for security. Councillor Thexani's tentacles writhed with pleasure as she added. Third, cessation of all terraforming activities. Humans will not modify any more worlds without explicit Council approval for each project. Fourth, rumbled Creason from his stone throne. Termination of all contact with the 17 primitive species. No communication, no aid, no interference of any kind. These species will develop naturally or not at all. Elena's hand moved steadily across the paper, recording every word. The ethereal consciousness pulsed brighter as it delivered the next sanction. Fifth, establishment of Council monitoring stations on all human worlds. Our observers will ensure compliance with these sanctions and prevent future violations. Sixth, buzzed Councillor Vexhai with obvious delight. Restriction of human technology development. All research projects must receive Council approval before beginning. No new technologies may be developed without our oversight. Elena looked up briefly. May I ask who would provide this oversight? Council-appointed supervisors from approved species, Vexi replied. Beings with proper experience in managing young civilizations. Elena returned to her notes. Councillor Sthara's crystalline form sparkled as she spoke next. Seventh, trade restrictions. Human access to galactic markets will be limited until proper behavior is demonstrated. Only essential goods may be traded and only with Council approval. Eth added the delegate from the Tati Assembly. Prohibition on forming alliances or agreements with other species without Council consent. Humanity will deal only with approved partners. Elena filled another page as the sanctions continued. Ninth declared, the representative of the Wolf 359 Confederacy mandatory education programs. Human leaders must attend council meetings to learn proper galactic citizenship. And finally, Cathar said with evident satisfaction, a probationary period of 1,000 standard years during which humanity will be considered a protected species under Council guidance. Any violations during this period will result in complete isolation from galactic civilization. The chamber fell quiet except for the sound of Elena's pen on paper. She finished writing and looked up. "Are these sanctions final and non-negotiable?" "Completely," Cathar replied. "The Council's wisdom in these matters cannot be questioned. Humanity has 48 hours to accept these terms and begin implementation." Elena closed her tablet and set down her pen. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. "I would like to present humanity's perspective on these charges and sanctions." Several council members chuckled. They made her wind chime laugh again. "There is no perspective to consider," Cathar said dismissively. "The violations are clear. The sanctions are just. Your only choice is compliance or isolation." "Nevertheless," Elena replied quietly, "I request permission to respond." The High Magistrate waved one metallic hand. "Very well, though I doubt your words will change anything." Elena opened her briefcase and removed a different device. This one projected a holographic display of its own into the center of the chamber. "Thank you. I would like to begin by addressing the charge of unauthorized expansion into the Veil Nebula." The display showed a three-dimensional map of local space. The Veil Nebula appeared as a swirling cloud of gas and dust, with human colonies marked inside it. According to Galactic Law Code Section 12A, any species may claim uninhabited systems that are not already claimed by another species, Elena said calmly. The Veil Nebula was formally declared worthless and unclaimed by 3 different council species over the past 200 years. The display zoomed in to show specific documents and declarations. The Vegan Collective declared the region unsuitable for civilized development. In 2687, the Real Commonwealth called it a wasteland not worth claiming. In 2701, the Arcturian Federation classified it as hazardous and unprofitable. In 2719, Elena looked around the chamber. The chuckling had stopped. Humans claimed and settled systems that the Council had officially abandoned. This is not unauthorized expansion. This is legal salvage under existing galactic law. Councillor Ethmar's light flickered uncertainly. The law requires notification of claims. Correct, and humanity filed all proper notifications with the Galactic Registration Office. I have copies of the receipts. The display changed to show registration documents timestamped and verified. Elena continued without pause regarding the charge of reckless terraforming. I note that no actual definition of reckless was provided. However, Galactic Environmental Code Section 7 requires only that terraforming not damage neighboring systems or protected species habitats. New images appeared showing detailed environmental impact studies. Every human terraforming project included comprehensive impact assessments. No neighboring systems were affected. No protected species were harmed. All environmental modifications remained within legal parameters. The chamber was completely quiet. Now, Elena could see council members glancing at each other uncertainly. As for the militarization charge, Elena said Galactic Defense Code Section 3 specifically allows any species to maintain defensive installations for protection of their civilians and trade routes. The display showed the relevant legal text highlighted in blue. Humans have never built offensive weapons platforms. All installations are clearly marked as defensive and comply with size and power restrictions outlined in the defense codes. Several council species maintain much larger military installations. She paused to let that sink in. Now we come to the most serious charge, violation of the non-interference protocols. I have carefully reviewed these protocols and I found something interesting. The display changed to show the actual text of the non-inference protocols. Elena highlighted specific passages as she spoke. The protocols prohibit interference with natural development. However, they also include Exception Clause 7b, which permits intervention in cases of imminent species extinction due to unnatural causes. Elena looked directly at the ethereal consciousness. Gliese 6667c was dying from artificial climate change caused by industrial pollution. HD 437G was facing genocide, not natural territorial conflict. Proxima b was being destroyed by artificially triggered solar flares from a weapons test. The display showed evidence for each claim. Industrial waste, chemical weapons, experimental technology gone wrong. In every case, humans responded to requests for help from species facing extinction due to unnatural causes. This is not interference. This is permitted intervention under Exception Clause 7b. Elena could see the council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, which brings us to the final charge: excessive technological development. I searched extensively for any law that limits the rate of technological advancement for galactic species. She paused and looked around the chamber. I found no such law. In fact, Galactic Progress Code Section 2 explicitly encourages innovation and advancement for the betterment of all sentient life. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Keithar found his voice. Legal technicalities do not excuse the disruptive behavior of your species. Elena nodded. Perhaps not, but they do prove that humanity has broken no actual laws. Every action you have condemned was either explicitly legal or fell within established exceptions. She looked around the circle of alien faces, which raises an interesting question. If humanity has broken no laws, under what authority does this council propose to impose sanctions? No one answered. Elena closed her holographic display and returned the device to her briefcase. She picked up her tablet and pen. I have one more question before I give humanity's formal response to these proceedings. Keithar's glowing eyes narrowed. What question? Are these sanctions your final terms? Is this truly the relationship the council wishes to have with humanity? The High Magistrate's metallic features hardened. These terms are final and non-negotiable. Humanity will comply or face complete isolation from galactic civilization. Elena wrote that down word for word. Then she stood and prepared to give humanity's answer. Elena stood in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Her small human form looked insignificant among their towering thrones and alien majesty. But her voice, when she spoke, carried across the space with perfect clarity. Thank you for clarifying your position, she said calmly. I can now provide humanity's formal response. She opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder. The simple paper documents looked primitive compared to the holographic displays and energy projections around the chamber. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that this council has maintained galactic peace for thousands of years. That is no small achievement. However, during those same thousands of years, certain problems have developed. Elena opened the folder and removed the first document. In your own records, I found evidence of 47 species that approached this council for help with extinction-level crises over the past millennium. Of those 47, 31 were told that intervention would violate the non-inference protocols. Those 31 species are now extinct. She held up pages covered with names, dates, and planetary coordinates. The Valoran civilization asked for help when their sun began to die prematurely. The council determined that stellar manipulation was too advanced for their development level. The last Valoran died 200 years ago. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The Catherian species requested aid when a plague swept their home world. The council decided that medical intervention would disrupt their natural evolution. Their entire species died out in 6 months. Elena turned to another page. The Nexari people faced extinction when their planet's magnetic field collapsed due to industrial accidents. The council ruled that helping them would interfere with the consequences of their own actions. The radiation killed them all within a decade. The chamber remained silent except for Elena's steady voice. I could continue, but I think the pattern is clear. The council maintains peace by maintaining distance. You preserve order by preserving the status quo. You prevent interference by preventing compassion. She closed the folder and looked around the circle. Humanity has a different philosophy. We believe that with great power comes great responsibility. We believe that advanced civilizations have a duty to help those in need. We believe that the strong should protect the weak, not abandon them to die for the sake of protocol. Keithar's metallic features showed no expression. Your beliefs are irrelevant. Galactic law is what matters. Which brings me to my next point, Elena replied. She removed another document from her briefcase. During humanity's 2 centuries in space, we have been very busy, not just exploring and colonizing, but also studying. We have reviewed every galactic law, every treaty, every precedent established by this council. She held up the new document. We discovered something that even this ancient council seems to have forgotten. The original Galactic Charter signed when this council was first formed contains provisions that are no longer commonly used. Elena opened the document and read aloud. Article 8847C of the Galactic Charter states, "Any member species of the galactic community may, at their discretion, withdraw from council authority and establish independent governance, provided they give formal notification and surrender all benefits of council membership." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could see shock on the alien faces around her. No species has invoked this article in over 3,000 years, the ethereal consciousness finally said, its mental voice uncertain for the first time. "Because no species has ever needed to," Elena replied, "until now." She placed the charter carefully on her chair and picked up her tablet. "Humanity hereby formally invokes Article 847C. We withdraw from council authority effective immediately. We surrender all benefits of galactic citizenship and assume full responsibility for our own governance and protection." The chamber erupted. Council members spoke over each other in dozens of languages and communication methods. Lights flashed, tentacles writhed, gases swirled in agitation. Silence. Keithvar's voice boomed across the chamber, cutting through the chaos.
"You cannot be serious. No species can survive alone in this galaxy. You need the Council's protection, our trade networks, our accumulated knowledge." Elena's expression remained calm. "Do we?" She gestured, and her holographic display activated again. This time it showed a different kind of map, one that highlighted human trade routes, defense networks, and diplomatic relationships. Over the past 50 years, humanity has quietly developed independent relationships with hundreds of non-council species. We trade with 37 different civilizations that the Council has classified as too primitive for contact. We share technology with 42 species that the Council considers unworthy of advancement. The display zoomed in to show specific examples. The Andromedan refugees that the Council refused to help. We gave them sanctuary and helped them rebuild their civilization. The Centauran mining colonies that couldn't afford Council membership fees. We provided them with fusion technology and fair trade agreements. The Lyron research stations that were denied access to galactic databases. We shared our scientific knowledge freely. Elena looked around the chamber as the implications became clear. Humanity has spent 2 centuries building relationships based on mutual aid and respect, not hierarchy and control. We don't need the Council's protection because we have allies. We don't need your trade networks because we have our own. We don't need your accumulated knowledge because we're creating new knowledge every day. Counselor Thexani's tentacles writhed frantically. But what about galactic stability? What about the order we have maintained? What about it? Elena asked quietly. Your order is built on abandoning the weak and preserving the privilege of the strong. Your stability comes from preventing change and progress. Your peace exists only because you silence anyone who disagrees with you. She paused and looked directly at each council member in turn. Humanity rejects that vision of galactic civilization. We choose to forge our own path. Keithvar leaned forward, his glowing eyes intense. You think you can build something better than what has endured for millennia? We don't think we can, Elena replied. We know we already have. She activated her display one final time. The hologram showed a complex network spanning multiple star systems, connecting hundreds of worlds and species. The Human Accord currently includes 237 member species. Unlike council membership, our alliance requires no fees, no tests of worthiness, no surrender of sovereignty. Species join because they choose to, and they remain because they benefit from cooperation. The display showed statistics, trade volumes, technology sharing agreements, mutual defense pacts, joint research projects. Our member species develop at their own pace, with help when they ask for it, and freedom when they don't. They solve their own problems when possible, and receive aid when necessary. They advance their technology through cooperation, not competition. Elena gestured to specific data points. Since joining the Human Accord, not a single member species has faced extinction. 7 have successfully dealt with natural disasters. 12 have solved resource crises. 23 have advanced from pre-industrial to space-faring status. 6 have developed faster than light travel independently. She closed the display and faced the council. In 50 years, the human accord has saved more species than this council has helped in 1,000. We've prevented more conflicts than you've mediated. We've created more prosperity than you've distributed. And we've done it all without forcing anyone to obey our rules or accept our authority. The chamber fell silent again. Elena could see fear in some of the alien faces now. Not fear of humanity, but fear of change, fear of being proven wrong, fear of becoming irrelevant. "What do you want from us?" Kethar asked finally. Elena smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a victorious smile or a mocking one. It was genuinely sad. "Nothing," she said softly. "We want nothing from you at all." "That's the point." She began packing her materials back into her briefcase. "Humanity came to the stars hoping to find kindred spirits. We hoped to discover civilizations that shared our values of exploration, cooperation, and mutual aid. Instead, we found a bureaucracy more concerned with maintaining control than promoting progress." Elena closed her briefcase and picked it up, so we decided to build what we were looking for ourselves. Elena walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The massive alien forms around her seemed frozen, as if her words had turned them to stone. She reached the great doors before anyone found their voice. "Wait," called Cathvar, his metallic voice carrying desperation for the first time. "You cannot simply leave. There must be negotiations, compromises. Surely, we can reach some accommodation." Elena paused at the threshold but did not turn around. "You had 2 centuries to reach accommodation with humanity. You chose intimidation instead." "We maintain order," protested Councillor Thigzani, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "Without the Council's authority, the galaxy will descend into chaos." "Perhaps," Elena replied, still facing the doors, "or perhaps it will ascend into something better." She turned back to face the Council one final time. The beings who had seemed so imposing when she arrived now looked smaller, somehow ancient, tired, afraid of a future they could not control. "For those species who share humanity's vision," Elena said clearly, "for those worlds that this Council has written off as primitive or worthless, for those civilizations that have been abandoned to die for the sake of protocol, you know where to find us." Then she walked through the doors and was gone. The Council sat in stunned silence for long minutes after her footsteps faded. Finally, Kethar spoke. "She will be back," he declared, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Humanity will discover they need us. They will come begging for readmission within a decade." But the chamber felt different now, empty, diminished. In the months that followed, Elena's final words proved prophetic. The first to reach out were the 17 species that humanity had interfered with. They formally petitioned to join the human accord within days of Elena's departure. The Gliese 66667C natives, now thriving with renewable energy, offered to share their innovations with other member worlds. The HD 4307G refugees became some of the Accord's most effective peacekeepers, helping to resolve conflicts through mediation rather than abandonment. Next came the species that had been denied Council membership. The Andromedan refugees brought their expertise in bioengineering. The Centurion miners contributed rare elements and processing techniques. The Lyron researchers shared discoveries that advanced medicine and agriculture across dozens of worlds. Then something unexpected happened. 3 Council member species quietly opened back-channel communications with human diplomats. The Epsilon Eridani Commonwealth had grown tired of Council regulations that stifled their artistic culture. They began participating in human cultural exchange programs. The Barnard Star Collective, composed of artificial intelligences that the Council barely tolerated, found acceptance among humans who judged beings by their actions rather than their origins. The Kepler 452 Federation, a young species much like humanity had been, faced mounting pressure from the Council to conform to ancient ways. They chose to embrace the future instead. Within 5 years, the Human Accord had grown to include over 400 member species. Their combined territory rivaled the Council's sphere of influence. Their technology advanced through cooperation rather than competition. Their economy thrived on mutual aid rather than exploitation. Most importantly, Not a single Accord member had faced extinction, war, or catastrophic disaster without receiving immediate help from their allies. The abandoned worlds that Elena had mentioned began to recover. Gliese 67C became a center for renewable energy research. HD 437G developed into a hub for diplomatic training. Proxima b, rebuilt after its solar disaster, became famous for its advanced space construction techniques. The galaxy watched as species after species chose cooperation over control, progress over protocol, compassion over cold law. The Council, meanwhile, found itself increasingly isolated. Their membership declined as species either withdrew or were expelled for disruptive behavior. Their authority weakened as former subjects discovered they no longer needed permission to thrive. High Magistrate Cathar called emergency session after emergency session, but the solutions remained elusive. How do you fight an idea? How do you control people who no longer fear abandonment? How do you maintain authority over beings who have found something better? We could use force, suggested Councillor Vexai during one particularly desperate meeting. Military action against the human worlds. With what military? Replied Texani bitterly. Half our defense contractors have joined the Accord. They offer their services to species that actually pay them instead of demanding tribute. We could impose trade sanctions, offered Zethara. On whom? Asked Kixton. They trade with each other now. They don't need our markets. The ethereal consciousness, ancient and supposedly wise, offered the most honest assessment. We have become irrelevant. The truth was devastating in its simplicity. The Council had maintained power for millennia by being the only option. They were the sole source of protection, trade, and advancement for spacefaring species. Join the Council or remain isolated and vulnerable. But humanity had created a different option, better than isolation, more appealing than submission. The Accord offered everything the Council provided: protection, trade, knowledge, advancement, without demanding surrender of independence or dignity in return. Species no longer needed to choose between Council membership and dangerous solitude. They could choose freedom and cooperation instead. 10 years after Elena's quiet departure, the Council faced a crisis it had never imagined. The Accord's membership included over 600 species. Their technology surpassed anything in Council space. Their prosperity was evident on every world. Their influence spread through exploration and aid rather than conquest and intimidation. Most humbling of all, they never demanded that anyone join them. Species came freely because they wanted to, not because they had no choice. Cathar, older now and less certain of his authority, called for one final emergency session. The Council chamber looked smaller than it once had. Several thrones stood empty where former members had chosen to leave. We must face reality, he announced to the remaining delegates. The old order is ending. The galaxy is changing whether we approve or not. What do you propose? Asked Dexani. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his metallic voice carried defeat. Perhaps it is time to consider whether the galaxy's new direction is truly worse than what we have, maintained. The chamber fell, silent, as the implications sank in. Across the galaxy on a human world called New Geneva, Elena Vasquez sat in her garden, reading reports from Accords. Children played nearby, human children alongside Andromedan young and Centauran juveniles and dozens of other species. They laughed together in the universal language of play. An aide approached with a message tablet. Ambassador, we've received another communication from the Galactic Council. They're requesting formal negotiations about joining the Human Accord. Elena looked up from her reports, surprised. The entire council? Yes, ma'am. It seems they finally realized that isolation isn't working for them either. Elena considered this for a moment, watching the children play. She thought about that day in the council chamber 10 years ago, when ancient beings had laughed at the young species that thought it knew better. No one was laughing now. Send our standard response, she said finally. The Human Accord welcomes any species that shares our values of cooperation, mutual aid, and respect for all sentient life. If the Council is ready to embrace those principles, they're welcome to apply for membership like everyone else. The aide nodded and departed. Elena returned to her reports, but she smiled as she read about the latest worlds to join the Accord. Sometimes the most powerful response to condescension wasn't anger or argument. Sometimes it was simply walking away and building something better. Galaxy had learned that lesson well.